Welcome and thank you for joining Market Surveillance Committee meeting. Before we begin, please ensure you have opened the WebEx participant and chat panels by using the associated icons located at the bottom of your screen. Note that all audio connections are muted at this time. To ask a question, press #2 on your telephone keypad. You will hear a notification when your line is unmuted. At that time, please state your question. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. With that, I will turn the conference over to Dr. Benjamin Hobbs, Chair of the Market Surveillance Committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Operator. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the meeting of the Market Surveillance Committee, and with me are Scott Harvey and Jim Bushnell. Just stepped out momentarily. He'll be right back. 3 members of the MSC. We have on the agenda today a full morning of the day ahead market enhancements. It's a complex and fascinating proposal. I'm sure there'll be a lot of active discussion. And then the afternoon system market power analysis discussion, where I think we have, is it 2 or 3 presentations? 2. Two presentations by staff and by Department of Market Monitoring. And then to close off the meeting this afternoon, we'll be addressing the ESDR 4 discussion, including the issue of DEBs for storage. Am I supposed to say anything about these housekeeping items?
No.
Nope? Okay. But as always, we'll start first with public comment. I'll ask if there are any comments first within the room and then on the phones on any issue, although preferably if it's an issue that's we're discussing later in the meeting, if you could wait until that time, that would be more convenient. So first of all, within the room, does anybody have anything they would like to say on any issue? General public comment? Okay. Nothing within the room. Operator, is there anybody lined up on the phones who would like to make a public comment?
Please press #2 if you would like to make a public comment. We don't have any comments here. Okay.
In which case, we'll go to the next agenda item, which is Jim Scott, you have in front of you our minutes from the April 5th, 2019 general session, and I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Drs. Bushnell and Harvey, respectively. Any corrections or anything on the minutes? Anything you want to raise?
No.
2 heads have been shaken, so I'll take a vote. Dr. Harvey?
Yes.
Dr. Bushnell?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the minutes from the April 5th, 2019 meeting have been adopted, the public meeting. So at this point, we are ready to roll on day-ahead market enhancements. So in this discussion, we'll see, I think it's the first time a public presentation of some of the possible alternative formulations to alternative formulations. And in this discussion, there are a lot of things we could talk about. We could, definitely get into the details, but I want to make sure that we, that there are 3 basic things I want to make sure that we address. First of all, that we understand the problem that's being addressed and how market outcomes would be improved by one or the other proposal. So we want to be clear on what the problems are and then how they're addressed by the proposal. Second, it is complicated, and so we'll want to talk about whether there are any issues, possible risks that are not working as intended. Some of those risks can be managed by simply tuning the parameters as we learn in implementation. Others may be inherent in the formulation, and we want to identify those now so we can improve the formulation or whatever implications that has for the adoption of any of those proposals. And the third area is that if adoption of these imposes some costs that are unavoidable, then we want to talk about the balance of costs and benefits of making these changes. Is it worthwhile to go ahead? Do we anticipate that the improvement in market outcomes would justify those costs, and what are those costs? With something as complicated and thorough as these proposed changes are, this is definitely a challenge to identify those costs, identify the benefits, and what the risks are that in implementation, and whether those are correctable or not. So this is maybe the first discussion, but it certainly won't be the last of these. So at this point, I guess, Megan and George, the show is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We've got the whole morning, which is great. We're really hoping this can be an interactive discussion with the participants in the room as well as those on the phone. So where's my mouse? Okay. So as Ben mentioned, one of the things we've done is tried to level set and identify what the problem statement is. And with that, and keeping that in mind as we go through the development of the proposal, we want to keep going back to make sure that whatever we're proposing is addressing the problem statement. So that's what I'm going to be going over. Then George gets to do the fun stuff. We have two different market formulations, and we will present both of those, and then we'd like to compare and contrast them. We want to take this opportunity to identify the pros and cons to both of the market formulations, and that will drive the direction we move forward with. I've left 30 minutes at the end of this. We're hoping the MSC panel can opine or at least provide some input of the direction of the benefits of these two, or maybe something we missed and haven't thought of yet. So I actually have a big whiteboard in the room here. We'll try to keep notes, and I'll try to summarize our discussion after the fact.
I imagine we won't be able to restrain ourselves for an hour and a half. We'll, if it's okay, we'll be commenting throughout.
Yes, no, please do. So I'm going to start with the problem statement. My name is Megan Pogue. I'm with Market Design Policy. So as hopefully all of you know by now, did I jump too far? The CAISO announced a couple months ago that we were postponing efforts for the 15-minute scheduling piece of the day-ahead market enhancements. Originally, last year when we came out with the proposal, we identified that we'd be doing two phases. The first phase would be to address or implement 15-minute scheduling granularity in the day-ahead market, and then the second phase would be to introduce a new day-ahead product that could address uncertainty that materialized between the day-ahead and the real-time market time frame. Since then, we did development of what the 15-minute scheduling piece would look like and had to make some changes to the original proposal. One of those substantial changes was we identified we would not be able to do 15-minute unit commitments. Instead, we would just be able to do hourly unit commitments. And by doing that, we weren't able to layer in the commitment of units at their P-min to help address some of the ramping or granularity changes between the intervals. So that was one of the major benefits we hoped to gain out of the 15-minute scheduling piece that we realized we were getting. Additionally, we were hopeful that we'd have an increase of scheduling in the day-ahead market of hydro resource in the Pacific Northwest, but there's not necessarily certainty associated with that. So because we weren't sure of, but we knew the hourly unit commitment wouldn't be happening, and we were unsure of how much scheduling a 15-minute hydro resources we get from the Pacific Northwest, it made the CAISO question if the cost benefit was there. And with that, we decided to essentially stop work on the 15-minute scheduling piece, and we are just moving forward with the day-ahead market enhancements. It's no longer phased. We will be doing one effort for the implementation of fall of 2021, and with that, we decided we need to take a step back and look at what our operational needs are. So if we've got one shot at this, one opportunity to create a new product, one opportunity to come up with a new market formulation, we need to go back to why are we making this change. And the primary change for this needs to be to address our operational needs. So we spent some time internally to work with our operational team and figure out what these operational needs are. The first is ramping needs. We know that there are steep differences within each 15-minute interval of the hour, but we now know we will only be scheduling an hourly granularity in the day-ahead market. And the way our market comes up with a solution is it ramps from midpoint of 1 hour to the midpoint of the next hour. So even if we have steep 15-minute changes within the hour, our day-ahead market may set us up today, the way it works today, in a way that we can't meet the ramping changes from one interval to the next. And I've got a slide to show visually how this would work. So this is one of the operational needs that we need to address with the day-ahead market enhancements, is the ramping needs between our 15-minute intervals, given that we have hourly schedules in the day-ahead time frame. The second operational need that we'd like to address is net load uncertainty. We know when our market, or when we have bid and demand, as well as when we come up with the CAISO's forecast of CAISO demand, there's uncertainty associated with that. And we tried to define what that means. And what we mean by net load uncertainty is the CAISO needs to have dispatchable generation, so flexible generation that we can move around to meet any changes in the net load forecast. So that would be deviations due to load and deviations due to renewables. So any change that happens between the day ahead and the real-time market, the CAISO needs flexible generation to be able to meet those changes. We're defining this as net load uncertainty. Our third item we've identified that we want to address is deliverability. So we're coming up with a new product. We want this new product to be able to meet both of these two needs, but we also need this product to be deliverable where we need it. And I have a slide that depicts this as well. So this is an overview, getting to the punchline, but I'm a visual person. I like pretty pictures. So let's see what this looks like. So item one was the ramping needs, the steep differences between 15-minute intervals. These are our granularity differences. They result in 15-minute ramp in feasibilities. We can't ramp from one 15-minute interval to the next 15-minute interval because our market today is scheduled from the midpoint of one hourly schedule to the midpoint of the next hourly schedule. So let's take 3 operating hours in the day-ahead time frame, and you've got your hourly schedules. Well, we know in reality we're not scheduling hourly. Our load isn't coming in hourly. We have 15-minute intervals within each of the operating hours, as indicated here by your green lines. Well, we know today how the market works, that when we have steep changes between the 15-minute intervals, that you may result in a ramp in feasibility between those 15-minute intervals. Today, what our operators try to do to address this is bias or load conform. They'll try to commit resources in the day-ahead time frame so they have adequate capacity to be able to move from one 15-minute interval to the next. So our main takeaway here is, even assuming we have perfect knowledge, let's assume we do know what those green lines are in the day-ahead time frame, the market will still produce a schedule, an hourly schedule, that cannot meet the 15-minute interval ramping need because we have hourly scheduling granularity. And this was the main problem we were trying to address with DAME Phase 1, the 15-minute scheduling piece. But now that we're not doing day-ahead 15-minute scheduling, this will need to be addressed with the final DAME solution. So this is our first operational need that we'd like to address.
So I suppose you could look over past data and get a sense of the distribution of these between 15-minute ramps and how big they are or can be relative to the between-hour ramps. The proposal, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but the proposal is saying, well, let's limit the ramp capability to be able to do the entire between-hour ramps in 15 minutes. That may be overly conservative, or that may be too much. It depends on what we actually see. So it'd be interesting to see some of that data sometime. Yeah, we have not done a wide data set. Maybe that's something we could look into, but we have looked on a couple case-by-case scenarios. And one of the cases we looked at, do you remember, Don, we ran the numbers, and it was a considerable amount that the market was short of ramping needs. I don't want to throw numbers out without knowing them, so I'll pull it up here in a moment. But we did have an example of this. We wanted to make sure that this is actually something that's occurring. Our operators have expressed they feel it's occurring, and some of the scenarios we've looked at, we've seen it materialize. My only point is that it may be that constraining the ramps to be able to get the entire between-hour ramps in 15 minutes, that may not be the right number. It might be 20 minutes, it might be 10 minutes, depending on what this distribution looks like. And so I just wanted just saying we shouldn't necessarily lock ourselves into saying, yes, it has to be 15 minutes that we can do this within.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that gets back to this is the problem, right? We know right now we need to move from our 15-minute schedule to the next 15-minute schedule, but figuring out how we do that, maybe we've got some creativity in figuring out what that solution looks like.
This is Michelle Kita from the CPUC. So can you tell me if you have some sense of how many resources you're committing for this purpose and then what the cost of that commitment is? Because if you want to look at the cost and benefits, you have to see what's the problem and how are we addressing it now and how much does it cost to do that.
Yeah, so what we do today, we have a couple tools we do. We have our load conforming process, which occurs in our residual unit commitment market run, and that's where our operators can essentially say we need to have additional unit commitment, and that will prioritize our RA units because of the RA $0 availability, RUC availability. If after the fact, after the market runs, our operators are still feeling uncertain based on the unit commitment they have the opportunity to go and exceptionally dispatch additional resources or commit units through that exceptional dispatch if they feel it's necessary. And I don't have a specific number off the top of my head of how frequently that occurs.
But isn't that important to understand? Because if there's a problem, you are addressing it now, right?
We are, and the idea would be instead of doing it, let's assume that scenario does happen. Our operators do the load conforming process. They try to get unit commitment to meet these ramping needs through the market, but they don't feel confident in that solution. So their only tool after the fact then is to go out of market, and we see that as an inefficient solution. We'd prefer for those costs to be in the market so the market can come up with the most efficient cost.
Right, but I also think it's important to see if that is indeed the case, right?
So I can tell you we are exceptionally dispatching during the summer months especially. During the summer months, we are exceptionally dispatching. So if you could say, anytime you're seeing an exceptionally dispatched unit in a day-ahead time frame, is there a way that we can come up with a market solution that would commit those units through the market as opposed to the operators doing it after the fact?
Absolutely. I'm sure you can come up with a market solution, but the question is the market solution more efficient. So I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
And yes, anytime the market is able to run it and do the full cost analysis, the market is going to come up with a more cost-efficient solution than the operator doing it manually. The operator is looking not at the minimum load cost, the startup cost. They're doing it for an operational need as opposed to an economic efficient.
Yeah, and I guess I'm saying just trust but verify. So you trust that the market is better, but verify that, in fact, the cost of whatever you're doing out of market is going to be less costly than what your market solution is. That's all I'm saying here. Okay.
So, hello, this is George Angeletti. So one indication of the costs you're looking for would be to have a look at the additional commitment costs that RAC today performs and the additional RAC availability costs for settling the RAC awards. These are costs that are having a specific RAC cost allocation in our market. I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but these are available, so you can have a look at these costs. And this is basically a measure of what the market comes short and RAC has to fill in, so you will see these costs identified in the RAC commitment.
Okay, and I guess I can look at that, but I'm just hoping that you guys are thinking about that when you're doing that. That's all. Thanks.
I think the other part Michelle's asking for is to look at not just what are the exceptional dispatch costs, but to what extent would this logic do it, at a lower cost? To what, we can say the exceptional dispatch costs, but then how much are the savings, which is a little bit hard to say exactly why the operators are making a choice, but you could sort of go back and, like PJM does with the perfect dispatch, go back and rerun a model to see, okay, here's what they did. It cost $250,000 of uplift. Was there actually a better option? How much would, could we have, if we got the perfect solution, how much could we have saved? Obviously, you can't do that for every day, but you could do it, get some indicative information.
Noreen, go ahead and put the question through on the phone, please.
Sure. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, it's Lindsay Schmuckway from NV Energy. I just first wanted to say thank you for stating the problem statement and walking through some of the issues that you're trying to solve here. Part of my confusion with this whole enhancement, though, is thinking once things have been committed in the day ahead, moving into real time, there's that stuck commitment run that runs 4.5 hours out, and I don't quite understand why that doesn't provide enough, it doesn't position the resources in a manner that provides enough ramp to meet these changes.
That is an excellent question, and my presentation today did not get into that level of detail, but one of the problems, so I'll answer this in two parts. One problem with stuck is it's only a 4.5-hour horizon, so it's only able to commit relatively fast start resources. If we have a resource with a longer startup time, our only option to commit that is in the day-ahead time frame, and those often are bigger generators, and so if our operators feel the need to get one of our larger, slower start generators online, they have to do that in the day-ahead time frame. Another problem in meeting the ramping needs, let's assume you do have your unit commitment, is that maybe the unit commitment is occurring with a generator at a ramp rate that's in a lower ramp rate zone. Sometimes generators will be configured that when they're scheduled to their PMIN, even if they have available or bids into the real-time market, they're at a slower ramp rate. And our operators often want to get them into a zone where they have a faster ramping rate, so then they are able to meet the ramping needs. And we'll get into a little bit more of that.
Wouldn't stuck see that, though?
Stuck should, but there is...
But stuck isn't...
Go ahead,
to jump in. Stuck isn't dispatching for energy, though, so even if...
Right, but I mean, we're talking about day-ahead commitment. I mean, stuck is going to make the commitment decisions recognizing that, and then so you're still going to have to dispatch it up in real time. That has nothing to do with the day-ahead market. We're still going to have to do that if we make these dam changes. So,
yeah, but the real-time energy dispatch is only looking out
right, but
an hour.
That's going to be happening with these changes too. It's still going to be looking out an hour. That's not going to be changed by the dam changes.
But, well, the dam changes. No, what I'm saying is that what I'm saying is that for the generators that have to be at dispatchable PMIN, even if stuck will see it, and the stuck energy dispatch may well be trying to dispatch it into dispatchable PMIN, but the energy dispatch doesn't go to the
And that's exactly what will happen if we implement the day-ahead market changes. It will see that you have to be at that level, but unless you dispatch it there, it won't happen. We have to dispatch. That's a completely separate issue. You have to dispatch it right in real time, whether you make the day-ahead market changes or do it handle it in stock. That's a separate issue.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott, and that is something we've discussed, and we didn't go into that level of detail, but you have to get the unit committed in the day-ahead time frame so it's flexible enough with the ramp rate you need to meet those ramping changes or needs in real time, and that is something we're discussing. But to Brad's point, stuck is going to just do your commitment decision, but it's your RTPD or 15-minute market that's going to be scheduling the energy. So if you've got a really slow ramp rate and it's going to take you 2 hours to move from a slow ramp rate to a faster ramping rate, the 15-minute market isn't necessarily going to be able to move you to get you there for the interval it needs you to be there or the generator to be there. So these are all things we are discussing.
So even the 15-minute get you there because it doesn't send dispatch instructions. It's only RTD that will actually move you up.
So make sure I'm following you, Scott. So you're saying, so we put these changes in the day-ahead market, the day-ahead market would schedule the generator at its dispatchable PMIN to meet the ramp, but you're saying then RTD then might undo that because it's not seeing it.
Right, just what Megan said is exactly right. The day-ahead market will do the commitment. It'll make sure we have the units committed right so we could dispatch them, but we still have to dispatch them in real time.
So one of the solutions would maybe be, in order to meet this, and again, this is the problem statement, right? Our solution has to be creative enough to know we can accomplish this, would be instead of committing to the unit PMIN, that we commit it to the unit dispatchable PMIN, so it's already in that faster ramp rate zone, which today our market doesn't do, but maybe that is part of the market solution that would set you up, your unit commitment in the right ramp rate zone to meet these changes.
Any Anybody else on the phones? Okay. Operator?
We have two other questions. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike Castellano from CPUC Energy Division. While you had this slide up, Megan, I just wanted to make a point about the ramp requirements.
Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so like where you have that red arrow drawn from the one interval to the next interval, this one's not particularly bad, but when you move from calculating a ramp requirement in day ahead, given day ahead schedules at the sort of middle of the hour average, to needing to ramp in the 15-minute real time, you still you're not actually dispatched. So on this, interval 3 of this first hour, your fleet is not dispatched at the same point from where you calculated the ramp in the day ahead. So with this formulation, you're still sort of not guaranteed to have the amount of ramp that you need for any of these intervals, I think.
Yeah, actually, no, I think we're saying the same thing, and we know that problem exists today, so we want to make sure that whatever product we're coming up with or whatever market formulation we're doing, given the fact that we know we have the constraints of an hourly schedule, how do we set ourselves up so we know this problem exists, but we want to be able to ramp from the 3rd to the 4th interval? So I absolutely agree with what you're saying.
Okay, but
hi, Mike. This is George.
Hey, George.
Just to add to that, okay, go ahead. So, Mike, the issue that we need to address here, in addition to the pure uncertainty, is also the granularity that you're referring to. So this is an issue that we face similarly today at a much lesser extent in the FMM procurement of the flexible ramp product, and we collect historical samples to have a measure of historical uncertainty by observing the uncertainty between the FMM demand forecast and the worst real-time demand forecast. So in a similar manner, if you're going to collect samples to evaluate the historical uncertainty between day-ahead market and 15-minute market, you also have to cover the granularity difference by looking at the uncertainty that could materialize between your hourly day-ahead schedule and your worst 15-minute demand forecast. So it's a similar problem like the one we have in FMM, but it's of course at a larger capacity level.
So George, I think you're talking about, if I'm understanding you properly, you're talking about ensuring that you're procuring the correct amount of flexible ramp from the hour or from the day-ahead dispatch point, essentially, right? Or the day-ahead scheduling
yes.
point. Or in the example you're using, the FMM dispatch point. But what I'm saying is, like, in this interval 3, you're not at the day-ahead scheduling point, right? So you don't really know how much ramp you have available at that time.
Right.
So I'm just saying, in the day-ahead time,
you don't know.
Whatever you procure, whatever you schedule in the day ahead, you have no idea if it's actually going to be, what quantity will really be available when you get there in real time, right?
You don't know the spots that will be in the FMM. What you're trying to do is you try to evaluate the historical uncertainty from one interval to the next, and going from the day ahead to the worst scenario that could materialize potentially in the FMM market over the hour. And once you have these requirements, then you procure the product so that you can meet these requirements within your confidence interval, so that then within that confidence interval, you can meet those uncertainties that they materialize from one interval to the next. I think that's the way we can frame the problem and what we're trying to solve for.
Right. Okay. I think we're still talking past each other a little bit, but I think I get what you're saying.
Well, I think you can break it down into two items, Mike. You can think of the midpoint hour to midpoint hour ramp rate as, if that's 100 megawatts change, the day-ahead market says we got enough to ramp, assuming that we ramp for all 60 minutes at the full ramp rate. But the actual pattern is the load might stay level for 30 minutes, then we get the entire change in the last 30 minutes, and when we tell the units to ramp at that rate, they can't do 60 minutes ramp in 30 minutes, so that we don't have enough because the pattern is different. And as George said, there's another element, which is, well, maybe our midpoint is completely wrong anyway, that the load is 200 megawatts higher. So we've got the two types of uncertainty. One, that maybe we've got the midpoints right or the average level right, but it doesn't symmetrically happen over the hour, so that we get 60 minutes of ramp covers the load change in 60 minutes, because RTD can't move them that way. And then secondly, we've got the uncertainty about whether we're even right about what we have to deal with. And I think that's
You're beating me to the punchline, Scott.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that is where we're going. So I think we're all getting the same idea. Mike, do you have anything else to add for now?
No, not for now. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you. I think we've got one more question on the phone.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, Megan. Good morning. It's Mark Holman with PowerX. Just a few comments. One is that thank you for this presentation. I think this is a really good, clear description of some of the challenges that you're trying to address through an improved market design. I just wanted to back up a little bit to the dialogue that happened on, evaluating the costs of using tools like exceptional dispatch instead of doing it through the market. And I think one thing that perhaps is a given, but I think is really important, is to separate out the idea of prices being lower because of a more efficient market versus prices being lower because of an inefficiency in the market. And I think tools like exceptional dispatch, load biasing, even a sequential RUC are all inefficient in that you're not able to efficiently make trade-offs through co-optimization. You're not able to publish the true market clearing prices, the true marginal clearing prices for each product. That may be cheaper for the entities and the regions that are net purchasers when you have exceptional dispatch, because there's side payments out of market, but that kind of violates the foundation of markets, which is market efficiency. And so I think what you're doing here, and a lot of what we're seeing today in this presentation, is striving for solutions that procure all the products that are needed efficiently within a co-optimized process. So I just want to make sure when we're examining which one's cheaper, it really should, or less costly, it really should be from an efficiency perspective, not what is cheaper to the entities or regions purchasing, because we have out-of-market actions that are suppressing prices inefficiently.
And I'd like to respond. This is Michelle Keeter from the CPUC, and I can appreciate your position, but what I'd like to say is that I think people should understand the trade-offs that they're making and make them with that full knowledge. So that's what I'd like to add. Thanks.
I think we're all there.
And I just understand that I understand that what is being proposed here in the design would, from past discussions, also be the foundation potentially for an EDAM. So, of course, everyone should have full knowledge and transparency, but I think that for the broader West, really seeing that we're taking a principled approach of trying to achieve market-efficient solutions, not solutions that are necessarily lower priced or higher priced through market inefficiencies that may benefit one entity or one region or groups of entities or groups of regions.
I'd also like to respond to that. So I would also like to note that the Western region doesn't have a clearing price that clears at the highest marginal price. They have a different kind of market. They have bilateral markets. So there are different kinds of markets. So I'm just saying, you're basically saying you want a market that clears in California primarily at the highest price, but you're not necessarily opening your market up to that in the West, all through the West.
No,
so I just think we should be careful when we make these.
Please don't misunderstand my comments. I'm just saying we should seek to minimize exceptional dispatch and uplift and out-of-market actions, not go for a higher or lower price, but go for an efficient market solution.
I think most of us agree. I think we're the right metric is market efficiency. I don't think anybody's really disputing that here. But we appreciate the comment, Mark. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask? Excuse me, or add to that?
I know later. I think this is a really good presentation and really good dialogue on this topic, and well presented in terms of some of the challenges.
Okay. Jim, you have something to say? No? Okay. We have nobody else in the lines, right? So, great. Onwards and upwards. Pardon?
Just asking if there are any other questions.
We don't have any other questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Megan.
Excellent. Onward. So we've identified operational need number 1. Now let's go to operational need number 2, which we've already touched on. So George, Scott, you beat me here, but we're defining this as net load uncertainty. We've thrown out the term uncertainty quite a bit, and there's a lot of ways you can think about uncertainty. We were just generally saying changes between the day ahead and the real-time market. So we got together and thought, what does that really mean? What need are we trying to address? And I think this definition is really important, that net load uncertainty is the need for dispatchable or flexible generation to meet changes in the net load forecast. So that would be changes due to load or renewables. So again, I'm a picture person, so let's see what this looks like. So starting with our same 3 hours, we know we're in the day ahead market. We know we don't have 15-minute scheduling anymore, so we're scheduling with hourly granularity. However, we know there will be a 15-minute net load change for each interval. Well, in addition to meeting that ramp need between the 3rd and the 4th interval like we showed on the last slide, we also know that there is uncertainty. Our net load may come in higher than we thought it was going to, and we're defining this as upward uncertainty. It may come in lower than we thought it was going to, and we're defining that as downward uncertainty. So our takeaway here is, again, even assuming we do produce a 15-minute forecast, let's assume we did go forward with the 15-minute scheduling granularity in the day-ahead time frame, that we still know there's uncertainty associated with that. We still need to have dispatchable generation available to meet any changes for each 15-minute interval that may materialize due to deviations in load and renewables. So we've got problem statement 1, the last slide showing the ramping changes between your 15-minute intervals and needing to have adequate ramping capability to get from one interval to the next. You then layer on top of that the need to meet any uncertainty that could materialize in the upward direction or the downward direction for each of these 15-minute intervals. So this we're defining as our problem statement or our operational need number 2. With that, I'll open this up for discussion as well. Also recognizing that these correlate, they play in together, so this will be part of the design, but the design will need to address, might be one solution that addresses both of these, it might be separate solutions that we have to put together, but we want to address both of these problems. So with that, I'll start with the room. Any questions or comments from the audience on net load uncertainty?
Yeah, so Megan, I'd like to follow up on the very important point you made in the previous slide, which was about there are some resources that need to be committed well ahead of 24 hours ahead of time. I just attended a presentation by some ERCOT market designers, and they are going in the opposite direction. They're saying we don't have any resources really that need anything more than 6-hour notice, so we're not going to worry so much about unit commitment day ahead. We're going to push it to 6 hours ahead when we know a lot more what's happening with wind and solar, and a lot of this uncertainty might be reduced. So I thought that was interesting. I pushed back on that, and they said that really the stakeholders, none of them have resources that they need instructions further ahead. I was surprised because they have a big coal fleet. Could you tell me a little bit more about the sort of resources that we have that really need 24-hour instructions? Is it because they need to secure fuel supplies, or they really are very slow-moving, it takes 8 hours to start up or whatever? And how big is that compared to the size of the fleet? It's just very striking to me that Texas is moving in an entirely opposite direction from where we are.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I attended a technical conference with Don Trethewey at FERC last year in Washington, D.C., and I think it was MISO that was actually going the exact opposite direction of Texas, and they were looking at like a 2 or 3 ahead day commitment process. So it absolutely does depend on your resource fleet, and we've thought about this because we know in California specifically that our long start commitment is our generators with that characteristic, they're getting smaller, right? We've got all the once-through cooling generators that are either retiring, going offline, being changed. We've got nuclear plants that are going offline. So our particular resource fleet, there still are some. We still have a need for that, but it is getting smaller than it was, let's say, 5 years ago. That said, we do know that this is going to be the set up for our expansion of the day-ahead market to the EIM. So that's something we've also thought of, that we want to make sure the market design that we're setting up for California would also be an adequate market design for what we're doing in the EIM if we extend it that way. So I think that's a lens that we have to keep on when we're thinking about what the potential change was or is going to be, and I think for that need alone, we need to make sure that our unit commitment does extend to those longer start resources.
And of course, there's also storage, as it gets more important, then the longer horizon is also more important. But there are a lot of commitment decisions, and that's why STUC exists. That is a 4 to 6 hour time frame. And the Europeans have intraday markets all over the place, and some of them are saying, hey, you folks in the States should consider this. I'm just curious whether there are any discussions, any interest in perhaps formalizing a STUC-type process as actually a formal market, where we actually add a market, and so a lot of the decisions that commitment decisions we might be making 24 hours ahead of time can be pushed off the time frame when this uncertainty is a lot less.
Yeah, it is interesting. Actually, last year we briefly started a stakeholder initiative that was going to be an expansion of the STUC horizon, taking it from 4.5 hours to a longer period of time. So we did have more flexibility in committing resources, more of that like intraday time period. But there was complications with allowing that to be part of the EIM. And it was a really short stakeholder process. We hit some hurdles. We weren't able to go forward with it. But those type of discussions keep coming up, and it is an interesting concept. So I think there's, again, a balance between meeting the needs of California, meeting the needs of the EIM, making sure our market works for both, given that we have different types of resource fleets. But we have, interesting you bring up STUC, so we have thought about that.
So just as a time check, Ben, we want to make sure we leave enough time for George's simple and straightforward presentation.
We've all read the documents.
I did take a couple of notes, so that something we can look into is quantifying more the size of the ramping issue and our current actions, and then also the amount of the resources that need this day-ahead commitment and that would benefit from it.
Michelle?
I just want to follow up on that. So, yes, the OTCs are retiring. So, for example, Encina, 800 megawatts of a very slow start unit is now 5 CTs. So when you're quantifying this problem, hopefully you're taking into consideration in 2021 when these new resources replace it, does this problem still exist? Because all of the resources that are playing in the market are presumably much quicker. So I do feel like you have to look at the problem in the context of the resources that you do have and you will have.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up. We are keeping that in mind. And I do think the commitment discussion is one thing, but we know for sure that regardless of how we're committing the units, that this net load uncertainty is still going to be a problem. So with that, I'll hit my next slide. I know this is more fun to talk about than formulations, George. George disagrees. All right, our last problem statement is the concept of deliverability. So we need whatever new product we come up with, our new product, we want to address problem statement 1, the ramping needs, problem statement 2, the net load uncertainty needs. Well, we have to be able to get it where we need it. So I've got a lovely map of CalISO, And let's assume that your product is awarded in the PG&E territory. So that's where it's sourcing from. Well, let's say in reality, once you hit real time, that you really want the product to sink down in Southern California, Edison. Well, we know we have some constraints. We've got past 15, we've got past 26. And let's just assume for simplicity that past 26 is constrained. Well, we need that product, that new product, to be able to get out of PG&E, and this is just simplified, so we could say these regions change or the zones are different, but we need to be able to get the product from one location to the next location. So in this scenario, even if we procured the right amount, we still haven't even talked about procurement, but let's assume we had a target, we hit that target, we've got what we need for the system level. Well, if it's within one region because it's cheaper there, but the need is in another region, we have to be able to deliver that product from area A, let's say, to area B, and that would be within the BA itself. So this is our third problem statement that we'd like to address, and we've got really cool new constraints that George will be showing here shortly. So let me recap quickly, and this slide summarizes also what we're doing today to address these problem statements. So problem statement 1 was the need for 15-minute ramping capability to get you from one interval to the next. We don't explicitly model this today in the day-ahead time frame. Problem 2 was uncertainty and how much dispatchable generation is needed to meet net load changes. Our closest approximation to this is our RUC-net short process, which is what our operators do if they think the CAISO forecast of CAISO demand, the CAISO's estimation of what the forecast load is going to be, if that is not enough, they can bias. That's the operation slang term. We call it formally a conforming, so they can conform the forecast to get additional commitments to meet uncertainty that may materialize. This is not necessarily an exact science and an approximation, and there are efficiencies to be gained here, but this is what we do today. Item number 3, we want to ensure the product is deliverable. Currently, we do this at a BAA system level with our net import and export constraints, so we're able to do it for each individual BA, but not within the BA. So with that, one last quick round of questions, and then I'm going to pass it over to George.
I had a quick question. Just on your list of 3 kind of issues, apropos of the earlier discussion about exceptional dispatch, do you have any sense of which of these 3 is causing the most exceptional dispatch, or is the mystery of exceptional dispatch such that it's hard to tell?
So I've been bugging our operators to try to identify that, and when they explain it, it's a combination of the 2. And so that's why I broke it down into 2 distinct different problems. Problem number 2 is certainly more problematic in the summertime. Problem 1 exists when we know we've got really steep net load changes in either the morning or the evening. Yeah, 3, I don't think they see 3 quite, it's happening. They know it's happening. Our operators know that it's not always deliverable, but they're taking other out-of-market actions to meet number 1 and number 2, which may be helping with number 3. So they're all correlated.
I think number 3 is the key. I mean, look, I've been looking at the data for other ISOs, and as I've told the ISO repeatedly, the shadow price of FlexiRamp and RTD is consistently 0. Which means in RTD we're doing nothing. We're doing no out-of-merit dispatch to create ramp in RTD because we're all putting it places where it's free and it can't be dispatched. So we end up with price, and I think all of the things the operators are doing is driven by the fact that we're putting our FlexiRamp where it can't be delivered.
Yeah.
And it's even worse than addressed at the BAA system because we're really saying it can be exported from one BA, but we're not testing whether it can be delivered to where we need it. So, I mean, that's, you know, if we don't address that issue in this process, we're not going to achieve anything, because I think that's the most important problem we got to fix.
Yeah, I agree.
Otherwise, we're just scheduling more ramp that can't be delivered day ahead and paying more for it. So we gotta schedule it where we can use it.
And I think that gets back to Mark's point from earlier that we're doing all of these out-of-market processes now, and that is not efficient. So regardless of cost, we want to make sure we're reducing that market operator out-of-market actions to get those into the market so you get the best solution. With that, any questions on the phone? One question on the phone, operator. We'll take that now.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hey, Megan. Steve Greenleaf with CES. Just a real quick question. A lot of the issues being raised talk about kind of cost and patterns of out-of-market actions, whether it's ED or RUCnet short. Isn't Guillermo currently assessing that as part of the price performance analysis? Can you talk just a little bit about how that effort is going to feed back into this, if at all? Or maybe they aren't as related as I think, but can you talk a little bit about some of the data he's pulling together?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Good point, Steve. Guillermo's team is doing, it's called the Price Performance Analysis Initiative, and our objective of that is to analyze and understand what operator out-of-market actions are being taken, why those are being taken, and what impact that has on the market clearing price. So we want to understand if there is any adverse impacts to pricing based on operator actions, also understanding that operator actions right now are being taken because our operators got to run the grid, right? They're going to do what they need to do to keep the system going. But if we're able to identify that, yes, they're biasing and they're EDing because they have a product that's not deliverable and that's increasing prices or suppressing prices, whatever it is, then that will hone in on what the problem is. And if we know what the problem is, then we can come up with a solution to address that. So Guillermo's piece is more focused on convergence between markets, so day ahead to stuck task RTPD and RTD, whereas this is focused primarily on the day-ahead solution. But I think what Guillermo comes up with will drive part of, or our solution here needs to make sure it's correlated with what Guillermo's doing. And we do have a stakeholder call that will be coming up on that the end of June as well.
Okay, I knew you were supposed to produce the first analysis in June sometime, and I know you have a meeting coming up on this on the 20th. I was just wondering if you were going to attempt to align those at all. Just to talk about some of the planning.
Yeah, we'll make sure there's alignment. I'm also from the policy team working with Guillermo's team on that, so we'll make sure we're keeping them both on the same track. Thanks for bringing that up.
All right, thanks.
If that's all we have on the phone, then Megan, thank you very much. And George, it's your turn.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. So we're going to walk through some of the basic elements and differences between the two formulations that we propose. Thank you. And we did release two technical documents that have all the details. And we thought, reading one technical document may be a challenge, but two would be overboard. So we followed an approach where we actually highlighted the differences and the new elements in the second document about the integrated IFM rack. And we're going to follow a similar approach here in the presentation. We'll be highlighting differences between the two methodologies. And the sequential IFM methodology is not entirely new. We did present on that in the last stakeholder meeting for the day-ahead market enhancements. So I'm going to start by a straight comparison of these two. So in the sequential IFM and rack, we use a different name for rack, and I will explain. We use it as reliability and deliverability assessment. We have three passes for the day-ahead market: the market power mitigation, which is a test IFM run to identify bits that need to be mitigated for the market run, which is IFM. That's your financial market. And in this proposal, we are inclined to move rack outside of the day-ahead market as a post-day-ahead market tool. We call it reliability and deliverability assessment because we want to have more features in that tool. One of the motivation for that is the fact that the day-ahead market now will be producing hourly schedules. As Megan mentioned earlier, does not address the problem that we may be seeing in real time on a 15-minute granularity in the FMM. So by having a tool outside of the market, like the reliability and deliverability assessment tool, we'll be able to actually perform 15-minute calculations and make sure that the hourly schedules produced by the IFM are either feasible with respect to 15-minute ramp requirements for real time, and see if we need anything additional, like additional unit commitment. The other elements of the day-ahead market are all the same. The hourly intervals, we introduced flexible ramping product to energy and ancillary services for the commodities. We introduced this new concept of regional deliverability constraints. There are going to be hourly constraints in the sequential IFM. And then basically the RDA will be looking after the market, will do an assessment to see whether we got everything that we need to confidently go to real time with these hourly schedules. And if that's not the case, the RDA may result to additional unit commitment, which will be an exceptional dispatch. Now, we heard some comments from Mark Holman earlier. This approach, if the understanding is that the market gets it right, using Scott's words here, the RDA will have a minimum impact and will be confident to go to the real time with the results of the day-ahead market. And then the cost of the exceptional dispatch, which is not reflected in the market, is going to be minimal and of no concern. If that is not the case, then obviously having elements outside of the market does not constitute a good market design, so this is something to look over and worry about this particular formulation.
Just a quick question, George. So the material you're presenting today and in the technical documents actually doesn't show the RDA formulation, right? It's only showing the IFM portion of the
that is correct.
Process. Okay.
That is correct, and thank you for pointing that out, Ben. So in the technical document, we focus on the IFM formulation for the sequential IFM RDA. The reason for leaving the details for the RDA is because we haven't internally really closed into what exactly this tool is going to be. This is going to be similar to today's rack, but we want to introduce some additional features. In rack today, we limit the rack schedules to be incremental to the IFM schedules. We don't like that. So in the RDA, we have the ability to go up and down from the financial schedule. Also very useful will be to have a 15-minute formulation so that we can address the granularity problem between the hourly FM schedules and the projected FMM 15-minute schedules. So because we haven't really elaborated completely internally on what this tool will look like, we would like to move on that after we get some feedback from the MSC and the stakeholder process on which of these two candidate formulations is the one we should go forward. Then we'll start working on the details underneath.
As you mentioned, a couple of important features of RDA which differentiate from RUC. One is the 15-minute granularity, and maybe also the ability to go up and down. If I understand the second proposal, integrated IFM RUC, you can go down in that one, but it would not have the 15-minute granularity.
Correct.
Okay, so it would have one out of those two features.
Right. So moving on to the next column, I will highlight the difference of the integrated IFM rack. So here what we're trying to do is, instead of having a rack as a separate process, either within the market or outside the market, we want to bring it within the IFM and solve the two sub-problems together in an integrated fashion. So we'll only have two passes in this day-ahead market, the MPM, which is a test run again for identifying reasons for mitigation, and then the combined IFM rack, the integrated IFM rack, where we meet the objectives of both the IFM and the rack in an integrated fashion with one problem. Still hourly intervals, still the same commodities, energy, ancillary services, a flexible ramp product. We also have the regional deliverability constraints here. They may look a little different. We'll work on that. We will work on that later. And the product that we introduce here, besides flexible ramp, is what we call reliability capacity up and down. So yes, this is an improvement in today's rack because we allow the rack schedule, which we call reliability energy schedule here, which is the financial energy schedule plus the reliability capacity up minus the reliability capacity down, and you always have either one or the other for a given resource. So we allow the reliability schedule to be either higher or lower than the financial energy schedule depending on the needs of the system. So we believe this gives you a better solution. And we price this reliability capacity not at an explicit reliability rack availability bid that we have today. We think that it's appropriate to price it at the same capacity price for flexible ramp bids. So because it's really capacity under the same resource used for similar purposes. And this is the difference that this integrated IFM rock formulation is deviating from what we proposed a long time ago. It was a year, maybe a year and a half ago, where we did not separate the flexible ramp product from the reliability capacity product, and we tried to do everything with one. So in that old formulation, we tried to do both the reliability capacity and the flexible ramp for uncertainty all in one product. And that had the outcome where the two sub-problems, the financial sub-problem and the physical sub-problem for rack, they were very integrally coupled through this combined product, which resulted in market efficiency doing these problems together, but we all thought that we got more market efficiency that we were targeting for because the reliability problem was overshadowing the financial problem, and we didn't like the effect on the financial problem from the reliability prices. So we believe we solved this problem here in this formulation by splitting the product to flexible ramp and reliability capacity, and additionally pricing the reliability capacity at a capacity bid rather than energy. So we have a much better formulation for the integrated IFM rack that we believe solves the problem of efficiency in producing a unit commitment in passes, once for the IFM and maybe additional commitment in rack. Now we can get it all in one solution.
I hope this is not getting too far ahead, but in pricing reliability capacity FRP bids, would there be any differentiation between what you pay RA versus non-RA that's committed as reliability capacity? So in the present RUC you do.
In the present RUC we do for reliability for rack availability. In this proposal for flexible ramp, we don't envision that. For the reliability capacity up and down, that's a question that we'll need to address if we decide to go forward with this proposal. Again, this is part of the next level of details that we'll start getting into once we clear out which approach we need to follow.
Thank you.
As I understood, the reliability capacity, the reliability capacity will be priced nodally, and it would be determined by the shadow prices of because you're going to enforce a parallel set of transmission constraints.
That is correct.
Yeah, so it would be nodally. So that's a sort of a key difference in the red things at the bottom. Under the integrated, we'll get actually locational prices for the reliability capacity.
That is correct.
And a generic FRP price. And under the sequential, we're really not going to have any kind of, we'll just be committing extra capacity, and there we can maybe give it the FRP price, but we wouldn't really have a nodal price signal for it.
That's correct. That's very good observation, Scott. Indeed, the reliability capacity, the pricing comes out of a power balance equation, so you have nodal prices for this. whereas for flexible ramp, it's at most regional with the introduction of the regional deliverability constraints. So there is a difference in the granularity of these prices. Do we have any questions on the phone before I go forward?
We do have 3 questions.
Oh, yeah. 3. Okay.
Caller, please go ahead.
Good morning. This is Kong Wen from Future South Energy. I do have a question. If I hear you correctly, you say the RDA will be solved on a 15-minute granularity. Was that right?
This is something, as I said earlier, that we haven't decided at this point, but since we're having the tool run outside of the market and we're not constrained by the market timelines, we have the ability to actually spend more computing effort on it and be able to produce a 15-minute solution for that will address one of the major operational needs that we have to observe the 15-minute variability within the hour.
I see. Thank you. And another question I have is the reliability capacity up and down. Is there a requirement for that? And if so, how do you find that requirement?
Yeah. So just hold that question for my next slide, next few slides, and then we'll answer that.
Thank you.
Next question. Operators, anybody else?
We have 2 others.
Yes, good morning. It's Mark Holman with PowerX. Just a few comments on the sequential approach. I think that's one, we did write a white paper earlier this year that I think is at least conceptually somewhat similar to your second approach. And in that white paper, one of the things that we found was that the sequential approach, I know we've talked about it generically being inefficient, but one of the challenges with it is that your capacity needs, which includes both physical energy and any upward capacity, whether that's reliability capacity or flexible ramping product, has to be based on the CAISO's assessment of reliability needs. Whereas for solving your energy needs, it's really the market that solves it, which is physical and virtual supply against bid-in demand and virtual demand. And I think that separation really highlighted something for us, that in the sequential approach, you can get some pretty inefficient dispatch outcomes. As an example, you can have virtual supply displacing physical supply that results in you having to rock more energy sequentially, leading to a higher overall cost. So I'm really looking forward to today's presentation, because I think an integrated approach, including what you've done more than what we proposed, which is separating out flexible ramping from reliability capacity, really could be a more efficient design than we've seen anywhere in terms of the co-optimization, getting virtuals versus physicals appropriately separated, and getting the dispatch really efficient, all through co-optimized trade-offs. So looking forward to the description, George.
Thank you, Mark. You made a good observation, and I will actually elaborate on that in the next few slides.
Next question, questioner.
Hello, please go ahead.
Good morning, George. Good to hear from SC. Thank you for your presentation. I had a question on your the integrated proposal. So as you mentioned a year ago, back in June, you had the imbalance reserve proposal, and that was abandoned by the CAISO. As I recall, it was explained that there was an infeasibility. The details of the infeasibility weren't provided, but it seems that maybe there was not an infeasibility according to what you're stating, or was that something else?
No, as we explained afterwards, we had the chance to see some results from that methodology from our test bed applications that we developed to test it. We realized that having one product coupling the financial and the physical sub-problems resulted in a very tight coupling, and the inherent difference in solving these two sub-problems, the financial energy problem is easier to solve because you have virtual supply and demand bits that they don't have ramp constraints and they don't have resource constraints. The physical sub-problem is more constrained. You have ramp constraints, and at that time we were doing it on a 15-minute basis. So 15-minute ramp constraints for physical resources are binding at the solution. So what we have seen was that the physical sub-problem was clearing at a higher price, reflecting these more severe constraints that applied that problem. And because of the strong coupling of the two sub-problems, the financial price for the financial energy schedule was affected more than what we could foresee. We wanted to have market efficiency by solving the two sub-problems together, but the outcome showed that the physical sub-problem was actually overshadowing the financial market, and that was not our intent, so that's why we abandoned that methodology. And I believe we solved this problem here because we really separated the product. So now the physical and the financial sub-problems, they have a lot more freedom for the market optimization to find a solution. So we have a better solution that both targets are met, and the prices do not show a very strong coupling that what we have seen with this previous attempt.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the stakeholders won't provide any detail. That's difficult to conceptualize or try to understand exactly what happened, based on the constraints. So you're basically saying that it wasn't just the fact that, or rather, I'd like to ask you also, it wasn't just the fact that you also assigned nodal pricing to the reliability capacity and you're still keeping FRP sub-regional. That wasn't it, right? That you needed
it was more than. Yeah, the nodal pricing, of course, you have it also here for the reliability capacity, but what we have done here is we priced that reliability capacity at capacity bids, capacity prices, not at energy prices. So again, we stayed close to what RAC is today, which is more of a capacity market. In that earlier approach, we kind of turned it into an energy market, and then you had the price from the reliability schedules reflecting an energy price. So it was a much higher price, and because of the coupling with the financial market, it was affecting severely the clearing prices for the financial energy schedule. So we believe that we solved all these problems with this new proposal for the integrated IFM rack. We have got very encouraging results from testing this particular application here.
I see. Thank you. In the formulation that you provide, you're basically just treating the procured reliability capacity as energy, yet you're pricing it capacity. So that I guess, point is missed. And I was wondering if I haven't thought of it that far because I just heard about this now, but I was wondering if there are any issues with the fact that you're treating everything based on energy interchangeability, but still you're pricing one at capacity. But that's a thought I'd just like to throw out there. But other than that, one more question I had is, would you possibly be able, because this would help since there's still certain pieces missing, would you be able to provide an understanding of how corrective capacity interplays within this, especially like in the graphs that you've given where you're showing how much will be procured by reliability capacity, how much by FRP? How does corrective capacity interplay, or even within the constraints?
Yes, I will be speaking about that in the next few slides. So if I don't cover it to your satisfaction, you can ask more questions and then we can take it from there.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions?
We do have one other question. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, George. This is Callie Wells with WPTF. First of all, apologies I cannot make it there in person. That's always meetings to attend in person. But actually, the previous discussion just answered my main question I had, but you did mention that you guys had done some price impact of this integrated approach. Will you guys be presenting those today or at the technical workshop at the end of the month?
What exactly you're looking for, Carly, for the stakeholder meeting? We haven't concluded the presentation, but it will be mostly driven out of these slides. Is there something more you would like to see?
Well, you just mentioned that you had done some studies looking at the correlation of, or the impact on energy prices with this new approach that kind of addressed one of the concerns of the previous integrated proposal. So I was just curious if you guys were going to go over kind of what you saw in terms of the pricing impact with this new approach at the technical work.
Yeah, so Kelly, we have also released 2 spreadsheet models that they show the solution for the IFM FRP without rack and the solution with this new proposal for the integrated IFM rack that shows this interaction. And, you know, time permitting, we can even walk through some of these examples in the stakeholder meeting. That would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, I think that would, no, I think working through those examples at the technical workshop would definitely help.
Okay, well, we'll definitely do that then.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so let me walk a little bit through the details of these approaches. So the FlexProgram product, as Mark Coleman alluded in his comments here a few minutes ago, has a slightly different form in the sequential IFM approach than the integrated IFM rack approach. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time here explaining the differences. So in both approaches, it is reserved up and down ramp capability between hourly day-ahead energy schedules, okay? And in both approaches, one element that it covers is the granularity difference between the day-ahead market and the 15-minute market. When it comes to the uncertainty, the target's a little different. In the sequential IFM, we don't have the demand forecast as part of our target. We clear supply bids, both physical and virtual, with demand bids, both physical and virtual. So the uncertainty we're trying to cover with the FRP procured in this market formulation is uncertainty between what the physical and virtual supply schedules are in the day-ahead market and what would be the FMM demand forecast. Okay? So if we're going to calculate uncertainty requirements for this product, we'll have to be harvesting historical data between these differences. Where the physical and virtual schedules clear in the day-ahead market and where the FMM demand forecast is, what difference we have there that will drive the requirement for this product. Other than that, everything is the same in both formulations. FRP is a 15-minute product, which is procured hourly in the day-ahead market. It's a 15-minute product because it has to be available for scheduling in the 15-minute market. For this reason, only 15-minute dispatchable resources can provide the product in the day ahead. So basically anything that has an energy bid except hourly intertie resources and the hourly classification of proxy demand resources and reliability demand response resources. It carries a must-offer obligation for FMM. What does this mean? If you have a flexible ramp award from the day-ahead market, you have to bid the capacity under that award with an energy bid in the 15-minute market. You have to make it available because that's the reason why we procure it, to be available in the FMM. And once you do that, you provide the bid, then you have fulfilled your requirement for the award, and the award expires at that time. So FMM will either dispatch it or not dispatch it, depending on whether it needs it or not, and it's done. Now, FMM will start procuring FlexProgram product for real-time uncertainty from that point on. So you can see that the day-ahead FlexProgram product covers day-ahead uncertainty going to FMM, and then in FMM we procure now a new product, which is also flexible ramp, but covering now real-time uncertainty. So in settling these products, there's not going to be any deviation settling from day-ahead flexible ramp awards to real-time flexible ramp awards. Basically, the day-ahead product finishes in FMM. After you submit your bids, you're done with it. And then we will be procuring real-time flexible ramp product in FMM.
Just let me understand what you're saying, George. When you say expires in FMM, do you mean the day-ahead market schedule settle against the FMM prices?
Correct.
Right, okay, and then FMM schedules settle against RTD prices. Okay.
Yes.
So it doesn't really expire, you settle up.
Maybe the word expire is not correct. I would say that the day-ahead product settles at the day-ahead price and it's done. And then the flexible ramp product is settled in FMM and then a deviation to real time, but there's no deviation between the day-ahead flexible ramp award and the real-time flexible ramp award because different.
We didn't understand your comment, Scott, and George's reply. So, so the day-ahead FRP, what did it mean to settle?
Well, because the day-ahead, you might be purchased as FRP day ahead, but you actually are scheduled for energy in FMM.
Right. So you might get it.
So and you're not providing FRP. So you have to buy out of the FRP, but you're getting paid for the energy, and with the co-optimization, you should be.
Yeah. Let me give you an example, Ben, so that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So let's say.
This may be where we use the whiteboard for the first time.
No. It's a simple example. Let's say you have a 10 megawatt flexible ramp up award that you have in the day-ahead market, and the price clears at $4. Okay, you get your $40 once you fulfill the requirement to submit a bid in the FMM in real time for those 10 megawatts.
Okay, so IFM, so we have 10 megawatts of FRP times $4, so you get paid $40.
Right.
Okay.
Now, we go to FMM, you have a bid for that capacity, all right? And FMM may dispatch that or not economically, okay? Let's say in this example, FMM does not dispatch it.
So maybe it goes like a 15-minute flexible ramp.
That's what I want to say. Let's say that now FMM, it gives you a 10 megawatt real-time flexible ramp award.
RTPD.
Yes.
Flexible ramp product, and it has some price.
Let's say it's $5.
Okay.
Now, you're settled for that, $50, and you have $40 from the day-ahead product and $50 from the real-time product. There's no deviation settlement. In other sense, we won't say that, oh, your 10 megawatt day-ahead product carries through real-time, so I don't have to pay you again in real time. All right, because the two products are serving different requirements.
Okay.
And you have fulfilled your day-ahead product, so you get to keep your money for your day-ahead product, and then you paid again for your real-time product that meets a different requirement.
Maybe you're dispatched maybe you're dispatched for energy in real time or something else, say 10 megawatts of energy, and you get whatever price that is. So you're getting these three payments. So you're getting paid for two different flexible.
Correct, but yes, I want to point out that in RTD,
if you dispatch for energy, you have to buy it back. But if you're reserved,
you don't buy it back. If you don't.
So let me make it simple. So we're still flexible ramp product, 10 megawatts in RTD. So there's no deviation. That's nothing.
Right.
So total is 9.
Yes. So there's no deviation from IFM to FMM, but there is a deviation from FMM to RTD.
Is that what you meant, Scott?
I don't know. I can't see it.
I'm sorry. It's like he's on the phone. You provided 10 megawatts day ahead. You got that payment of $4. So you got $40. You get to keep that, no matter what happens in FMM. FMM, maybe you get scheduled again for flexible ramp product, but at $5, and you get that $50. So you get to keep both. That's $90.
No, that's not the way I think of it. I think of it, you get paid the $40, and that would be it. And
right.
Then you sum up your deviations, and either you, in FMM, you got a schedule, and either you were scheduled for energy or FRP, and then you'd settle up, and then you'd have deviations between that schedule and real time.
Yeah, you said fulfilled their obligation.
And so you wouldn't get the extra 50. You'd get, if you continued providing all the way through to real time, you'd still have the original 40. But if we dispatch you for energy in FMM, then, you know, you might get paid $900 for that. So you'd get $900 in FMM, but you'd have to buy back the reserves, which are $50. So you'd lose $50, and you'd end up with $850 extra. That's like,
yeah, if this was spinning reserve, that's how it would work, right? That you got procured day ahead. And,
So
this is very key.
Very key. So let's spend a little time here to go through this, and then I'll take your question.
But can I ask a question? So how does this interact with the flexible capacity that we've already paid for that has a real-time bidding obligation? So it seems like we're paying people to have that must-offer obligation for 17 hours, and then we're paying them again through this product.
So I will explain. And the key is what requirements this product is targeting for. So to compare with spin, the spin requirement...
No, because it's not I get what the spinning requirement is, but I'm talking about the flexible requirement that has a day-ahead must-offer, and then it has a real-time must-offer. And the whole idea was to be able to meet that ramp and meet that. I mean, I feel like we're, again, solving the same problem. So do we get rid of flexible capacity then?
It's not the same problem, that's the key. All right? So what you're solving in the day-ahead, you're procuring this product in the day-ahead to cover two things: granularity going to FMM and uncertainty going to FMM. What you procure in FMM as flexible ramp covers uncertainty in real time, from FMM to RTD, from RTD to real time. So in essence, we take the requirement, which is the total uncertainty, and we split it into two parts. The day-ahead product covers the first part, going from day-ahead to FMM, and that's a 15-minute product. And then in FMM, we cover only the uncertainty that will materialize now in real time, and that's a 5-minute product.
Yeah, and I think I'm getting that. That to me seems like more like a ancillary service. But when you start to go in the day ahead, and you're basically saying now you have an obligation to move from the day ahead into the real time with a bidding obligation, you've already paid people to do that.
So if we pay people to be around for us in FMM, to solve the uncertainty that may materialize in FMM, and they're doing that, they fulfilled the requirement. Now, if in FMM we procure a new product for the real-time uncertainty, they have a new requirement for that. I will compare this against, let's say, we have a very aggressive way of procuring flexible RAM, trying to address uncertainty all the way from day ahead to real time.
Okay, so I guess I'm not understanding why we need three.
Okay, so let me just, I think George is answering Scott's question, and let me just take a stab at yours, which it's very analogous to resource adequacy and the energy. I mean, we're setting the price at which these resources get paid for whatever services they're providing. The flexible capacity requirement is only an offer obligation. In essence, it's forcing them to offer. And it's not designed to determine the price at which they are paid. And this is part of trying to determine that. And there's a whole bunch of other elements. The flexible capacity requirement is not as local as this, or may not be, or may be, and so there's a bunch of other differences as well. But I think your question is, speaks more to the sort of where the divide between an RA paradigm and a short-term market paradigm gets didivided rather than...
If you guys think you can do this in the day ahead in the real time, why do the flex capacity product? I'm happy to get rid of it.
I think that's a legitimate sort of discussion to have, but my understanding is trying to get people to offer it in the first place.
Right, that's what we're paying them now. We're now going to pay them a product to offer in
but
real
if they're
time.
not bidding into the market, they can't be dispatched through these new rules, I guess.
And we also need to keep in mind the extended day-ahead market. We haven't started the extended day-ahead market stakeholder initiative yet, but when we include entities outside of California, they they don't necessarily have the same RA requirement.
Okay, and if they don't have it, maybe we shouldn't have it either. I mean, for that flexible capacity portion, because we're now paying them to move to the real time. And to me, I don't think we should do that unequally if we're going to go forward to this. I really think you guys have to think long and hard about this. We are doing it in 3 different ways now.
I think conceptually, it's hard to imagine how a flexible capacity requirement could be a substitute for this sort of thing. Conceptually, you could imagine how this could be a substitute for an RA requirement, though. I mean, we've said all along that if you could find ways to reward the flexible generation through the short-term energy markets, then that lessens the need to have a separate RA requirement.
Yeah, and I'm there. So we have a system requirement, but the flex capacity is a must offer. And if we're now going to pay them for the must offer, we should get rid of it. So.
Paul Gribbick, PG&E. I have a question on this slide you have up there. You're saying you're up-down uncertainty between physical virtual supply schedules in DAME and the FMM demand, whereas in your white paper, you're saying you're setting it based on the uncertainty between the physical supply scheduled in DAME and the FMM demand. Which is it? Is it physical and virtual, or is it just the physical that you're looking at?
It should be physical and virtual because the understanding is that the virtual substitute for physical that is not there in the day-ahead market.
Okay, because again, take a look at what you have on page 11, where you're saying the requirements are set based on the historic differences between the physical schedules in DAME and the FMM demand forecast.
Yeah, I have to look for that, yeah.
I was going to say I had a problem with what was in the white paper because I could conceive of having everything cleared as virtual in DAME, in which case every 15 minutes you're going to say, oh, I've got to be able to ramp all the way to my, which would be way over procuring ramp. So, thanks.
I think you're right, Paul. I'll need to look back into that and maybe I need to clarify this in the stakeholder meeting.
Yeah, so thanks.
Not the slide 11, but page 11 of the white paper.
It's page 11 of the white paper in section 3.7, just below the equation. It says the FRD uncertainty requirements can be derived as an upper or lower percentile of historical error between the physical supply that clears in the DAME and the FMM demand forecast. And that seems to differ from what's on this slide. And I had a problem with what was on. Which paper are you looking at? Are you looking at?
I might be looking at you're talking about the IFM FRP one.
Yes, he's talking about that. Okay. And I think I can see the point. And when I wrote that, that was my understanding that if you have virtual schedules that they need to be replaced with physical capacity, you need to have flexible RAM to cover for that, and that's why I wrote it like that. So I didn't write it like that here. So
yeah, no, because I thought it was over procuring in the white paper, and then I saw this, and I went, oh, maybe the white paper had a typo. So thank you.
We'll clarify those. Thank you, Paul.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, before we take that question, I want to make sure that Scott got his answer of why we're saying that there's no deviation settlement.
It sounds like you've clarified there's a difference. Scott has wondered why the generator here is getting $90 rather than $40.
Yeah.
And you've explained that what you mean by...
Is that a good explanation? Because I could also give an example where we could have the day-ahead requirement and the real-time requirement and try to procure it all the way from the day ahead, and then that carries through with a deviation. Conceptually, you'll have similar outcome.
Well, let me put it this way. If, let's say that I think what you're saying is because we've required this hourly flexible day ahead, we're going to need less in the 15-minute in part, and that will reduce the quantity you'll need to procure. In a sense, so if this guy is committed to 10 megawatts of FRP day ahead, is the 10 megawatts in the 15-minute, is that coming from the same 10 megawatts of capacity, or should I think of it in some ways additional?
Yeah. In this example, it does. It doesn't have to, but in this example, it does. We constructed this example to show that you have a day-ahead settlement and in a real-time settlement that there is no deviation. So what it appears to be a double payment, I just want to make sure it's not really a double payment, but you pay for two different products that cover two different requirements. If you would have procured all the requirements the day ahead, maybe you would have a 20 megawatt day ahead award, right? And then that would carry through, it would have deviation. So it's our way of saying—
Think about this, George. If it settled, came through, then it should clear in FMM. So it should not clear. They should have an offer of 4 in FMM, and the market clearing price in FMM is 2. So the people that bid 4 don't clear, and they have to settle their deviation against their day-ahead market schedule because they didn't provide it in FMM. Whereas if they cleared for energy and they got dispatched for energy, we paid them more because we got to pay you for the price of energy, but now you're not providing flex in FMM, and then we're going to charge you the market clearing price of flex in FMM. So maybe, maybe it would be a wash, and it'd be $90 energy price and a $5 price of FRP. But if we were really tight in real time and the price was $900 in real time because we had a huge resource shortage, well, the FRP price might be $800, so they'd only net $100. So, I mean, we don't have to resolve this now, but I think this needs to be worked through. I think that all of these things should be settled, and they should be settled at the market clearing prices at each level. So
I think we've clarified what George is proposing. We're not going to resolve what's the right thing to do, but we can go ahead with the presentation.
Yeah, there's another question, I think.
Oh, okay.
Operator, go ahead and put the call through, please.
Caller, please go ahead.
Going from Puget Sound. I just add a comment on this. I think that the statement that the day-ahead market to the 15-minute market requirement is not relevant to the 15 minutes to real-time, I don't think that is right. I think how we set up the requirement for the flexible RAM product in the day-ahead market to 15-minute market, that will help the uncertainty in the real-time market. And so, in other words, there should be some overlapping between the two requirements, and I'm not sure if they are totally mutually exclusive. So I hope that question can be addressed later on somehow, whether they are mutually exclusive or they are overlapping to some extent. So that will affect how we compensate for the resources that get the award in the day-ahead market as well as in the real-time market. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, and I think we will provide examples in the stakeholder meeting to explain this better with numbers. All right. So let's see the difference of this product in the integrated IFM rack. So here we do have the demand forecast as part of the day-ahead market solution. So the product now becomes up and down ramp capability between hourly reliability energy schedules, and it still covers for granularity, but when it comes to uncertainty, now the product here covers uncertainty between the demand forecast in the day ahead and the demand forecast in FMM. And again, maybe it's easier to see here the separation with the real-time flexible ramp, which provides for uncertainty between the day ahead, between the FMM demand forecast and the real-time demand forecast. So you can see how the two are separated. Everything else stays the same, 15-minute product with master of obligation that is getting a day-ahead settlement and no deviation for the real-time flexible ramp product. So there is a subtle difference relevant to the particular design that we're going to follow on what is the FRP requirement, what it exactly covers. Let's move on a little bit to discuss the targets under the two approaches. So with the sequential IFM, one target is the clear supply versus the clear demand. So that's your power balance equation. We don't have the demand forecast in this formulation, so we measure uncertainty from the cleared supply, the physical supply as Paul pointed out, to meet the uncertainty that may materialize in real time. and we make sure that by dispatching this flexible ramp up capacity on top of the physical supply, we can meet the needs for the FMM. Similarly, for the down product, we measure negative uncertainty from the clear supply, physical supply in the day ahead, so that physical supply plus the flexible ramp down product can meet the demand requirement FMM with the uncertainty. And these three targets here, we have those three constraints. We have seen them before in the previous presentation. There's nothing new here. Your first constraint is your power balance constraint. Physical and virtual energy supply meets physical and virtual energy demand plus losses. And then you have the two requirement constraints for flexible ramp up that needs to meet the requirements, and flexible ramp down that needs to meet the requirements. Settlement is relatively straightforward here. All energy is settled at the saddle price of the power balance constraint at the lambda. There are nodal variations because of loss and congestion, but that's the price is driven by that saddle price. Flexible ramp up is having its own saddle price rho, and flexible ramp down at its own saddle price. Straightforward. Let's look at what happens with the integrated IFM and RAC. We have now an additional target beyond the financial target of clearing supply and demand. Now we have from the RAC subproblem the reliability capacity, which is shown in this example to be positive in the up direction, so reliability energy clears higher than the physical supply to meet the demand forecast. So that's a new target. There's an additional target in this formulation. Because we have the demand forecast available in this formulation, we can measure uncertainty with reference to that line and meet the target for FMM, and similarly for flexible ramp down. So you have now 4 targets, 4 equations, the same equations that we had before with additional one for the power balance of the reliability schedules. And again, the reliability schedule is really the financial energy schedule plus rack capacity up minus reliability capacity down. So when we are going to talk about the settlement, there is an additional settlement here of the reliability energy schedules with that saddle price Xi shown there for that power balance constraint. And we need to highlight that the differences between the lambda and Xi is lambda is driven by energy prices. Xi is driven by the capacity prices for reliability capacity up and down that we said we're using the flexible ramp up product and down product prices for that. Let me ask to see if there are any questions. These are explained in detail in the documents. Yes, Paul.
Paul Gribick, PG&E. I guess that chart on page 14 again brings back the confusion to me because you're showing 14, not 16.
Yes, sorry.
It shows the FRD and FRU being defined against physical supply again. I think according to what was on your slide 11, it should be virtual and physical, so I'm not sure what is being proposed. Well, I'm just looking for some clarification.
Yeah, the green line here, I'm reading it as cleared. It means virtual and physical.
Correct. Yeah. That's why I say cleared supply. So what we're going to have is flexible ramp up capacity on top of physical supply only to meet the demand forecast in FMM, plus the uncertainty.
That would seem to be over-procuring because if you're saying you want to have enough FRU so that you could add it to your physical supply to meet the demand, if I only had virtual supply clearing, you're saying in every hour I've got to be able to ramp the full amount to get to the demand forecast. Oh. That's the integrated IFM RUC works it off the reliability schedules and eliminates that problem.
That's true.
Yeah, so I think that that might be one reason to kill the first proposal if we can't figure out how to handle that.
So that's why I was struggling whether we have physical plus virtual supply as the starting point, or only the physical supply? Physical and virtual supply meets, it comes close to the demand forecast, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not looking for an answer right now. I'm just saying I'd appreciate a little more discussion in the paper and in the workshop to say, what are the differences, what are you proposing?
I mean, I think that it's common between both of the designs, because the what is the name for the other capacity? The RCU has to be dispatchable too. So if we had zero physical supply, RCU would be equal to load, and we'd have to have, and it's going to be bid in. The RCU is going to be flexible capacity.
But I don't think it's has to be flexible and rampable in every hour.
Well, that's a choice, but we're bidding if you be priced at the flexible price. So it's going to be, by definition, in this formulation, it's going to be flexible capacity.
But the RCU, I would be ramping it from the previous reliability energy schedule, so I could build it up over the day. If my load slowly builds and I can slowly put on my physical capacity to get up there, I don't have to say, oh, look, this 1 hour, all that built up, and boy, I've got to ramp everything in 1 hour. Mm-hmm. And I think that the integrated IFM RUC eliminates the problem, and I think more thought has to be given.
I think that's a choice you have to make, and you have to decide how you want to handle it in either model.
No.
And you got to decide whether this is going to be, we're going to worry about people bidding in all the virtual supply, or we're just going to be worried, or we're going to be in that, we're talking about real uncertainty, that we don't know how much energy is going to come in from those intermittents, and that we're going to need that.
But the thing is, the RCU and the FRP in the integrated model is always based, I believe, off of the reliability energy schedule. It's not based off the...
So Michelle Kita, so doesn't this go back to the problem you're trying to address? So as you defined the problem, it would be an incremental, right? But if you define the problem differently, then you could do something different. But if the problem is from the schedule, what do we do, right?
Right.
Again,
so
which schedule?
Yeah, I know.
Which schedule, right. So what's missing from here, from this figure, is the RUC, all right? Because it's still sequential IFM and RDA, and this only shows the IFM. So if the virtual supply is clear off the market in the day ahead, you still have the RDA to actually do your physical commitment. So that's not in the figure here, so that's why when we say physical supply in this figure, it's meant to be on top of what schedules the RUC will give you, which are not shown here.
But you don't know that because this is being solved before the RUC.
Correct.
So it seems to me that you would want to do it off of your physical and virtual and say, guess what, virtual, you're taking the risk of having RUC replace it. And if it doesn't show up, you're going to be charged a lot. So it's your decision, you're facing the risk, rather than say, we're going to sit down and in every interval possibly go from 0 to the maximum, have enough rampable. And I think that this formulation as written there could do that. So that has me a little concerned. Again, it's something I think I would like to see discussed in the workshop. So I'm not looking for an answer now.
No, you're right, Paul. That's why in the document I'm saying physical plus virtual supply, because the idea is that the virtual supply will be replaced by the RUC or the RDA. So then you're only concerned about the uncertainty that your ultimate physical supply, including the RUC's commitment, will get you to. So that's right, it's physical supply plus FRU, but you don't measure the uncertainty just from the physical that clears the day-ahead markets. Physical plus virtual will give you your target.
I think we're thinking about physical a little differently. I think you're thinking that the physical and virtual will be all physical by the time we get to this point. And so I think it just needs a little more clarity in the document.
Yeah, I agree. The difficulty that we don't have an explicit RUC schedule here in the sequential FM is potentially driving these problems. It is much clearer in the IFM RUC formulation because you have both targets there, and it's really clear what you measure and what you're trying to achieve. So it's much clearer to represent it in this formulation. In the IFM, the sequential IFM, you have to think where RUC is going to end up, which is not.
I think your guys are getting confused. I think it's an issue, but I think you've got the same issue in both models. And the only thing that's different is what you call it, whether you call it the RUC schedule or the RCU schedule. And either way, you got to decide whether that's going to be dispatchable capacity or not. And that's the question you got to deal with.
Yeah,
and you got to think through what the incentives the design's going to create for people to bid virtual supply or not. So you're right, Paul, but I don't think you escape that between the two models. I think in both models, you've got to decide how how that's going to work.
If the net virtual supply is correct, that is absolutely right, then you would basically look like the demand forecast. In essence, or it wouldn't look like the demand forecast. They accurately called exactly what we needed in real time.
Yeah, the only difference is that the RCU here being part of the formulation is an hourly dispatchable capacity. It doesn't have the 15-minute requirement. The flexible ramp, when we procure it, will require a 15-minute requirement. So, but there are differences between the two approaches, and we have to iron them out.
I'm just a little afraid that if we just write the formulas out without thinking about it too much, we may end up over-specifying how much ramp capability we need. So I agree that you have to figure out how you want to work in the market, but I want to make sure the market doesn't say, oh, by the way, here's a surprise for you because we misformulated something. That's all I was going for. Thanks.
And I guess following on this discussion, but I've been trying to determine what happens if there's net virtual demand and whether we would end up ramping to meet the net virtual demand, which is beyond what the physical demand would really need, and how that would look under the two formulations, which I think is related to this, but I don't
fully get. It would be fine to ramp down from it.
Ramp down for it.
If the virtual demand is saying, they're saying the ISO's load forecast is wrong, tomorrow's going to be much worse than you think it's going to be, and we're willing to pay the ISO to have capacity around. And then the ISO saying, no, don't worry. The thunderstorm's going to come through, and we need to worry about ramping down.
Thank you all. This is a great discussion. I believe there's still a question on the phone.
Operator, please put the question through.
We do have two questions. Caller, please go ahead.
Hi, this is Whitehall from ACE. I just have a very, very basic question on slide 17, just to clarify. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes. This one?
Okay, so this one, so to me, the energy dispatch, ENIT here, shows up in both equations. So, I mean, the first two equations, two constraints. So when the two constraints are both binding, will that energy dispatch be getting double payment?
So what happens is that you have a settlement for financial day-ahead energy schedules at lambda, and then a settlement for the reliability energy schedule at xi. I'm just breaking this down to see how this comes about in components. So essentially you have a payment for reliability capacity up, a charge for reliability capacity down, and a payment for the financial energy schedule because it assists you in meeting the demand forecast, which is your second target.
Yeah, but if for the both constraints, if both the ENIT is like kind of marginal on the both constraints, because you're going to come up with shadow price for both constraints based on the same energy bids. Right?
Yeah, if you break it down for energy, if you are looking for the difference between physical energy and virtual energy, you'll see that the physical energy has an additional capacity component because of the second power balance equation, that it contributes to meet the demand forecast, which is your second target, whereas your virtual supply and virtual demand do not have any contribution in meeting your demand forecast. The only clear energy supply bids is your first target for the financial energy market.
Yeah, I think I understand that point, but which point I don't understand is the second constraint. Even you say the capacity payment, but it still be based on energy bids. Because you involve energy dispatch.
Because if your resource is marginal and sets the price, you have to pay it adequately at its bid, and you have a price component that comes from meeting your first target, and then a capacity component that meets your second target. So you got to put those together to pay the resource adequately.
So
sorry, I'm just yes or no question. Does EN get paid both of these?
You go to slide 20.
Yeah, if I go to slide 20, we'll see the settlement. So I'm going to skip those. We can get back to those.
Yeah,
so,
that red line.
Yeah, that red line is the reliability energy settlement that applies to the integrated FM rack, and that has a settlement for the reliability energy schedule at the saddle price of the power balance constraint for the reliability schedules. And I just broke it down to see its components. Essentially, you're paid for reliability capacity up, you're charged for reliability capacity down, and there is also a payment for your financial energy schedule in the same manner that you're paid for reliability capacity up, because both those two products meet the demand forecast, your second target.
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And that's why virtuals will get a different payment than physical.
If you consider all of those together, right? Because virtuals do not get a reliability capacity product, and neither a flex ramp product. It's only an energy product. So physical resources contribute to all of those commodities that are co-optimized, so they get additional payments for the commodity that they provide.
So one thing I miss here, don't go back to 17 because it'll take a while, but in 17, it's the sum of across all I's that equal the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Here, it's resource by resource, the left-hand side.
It's a nodal settlement, yes.
And that's, in identity does hold resource by resource.
Yeah, that's a marginal price that, it's not different than your energy settlement in the financial market. You have another saddle price, which is nodally differentiated because of losses and congestion. So you have another settlement of reliability schedule at this marginal price, but this marginal price is capacity price driven. It's not an energy price that drives it.
Okay.
It's similar.
May be better taken offline as these.
Maybe. Just for a comparison, let's say we have rack. Rack has a nodal price, as you know, and that's a nodal capacity price. That's exactly what you see there with C. But because rack, we solve it incrementally, not in the same pass with the financial market, we do an incremental settlement only, so we only pay the additional rack capacity, the RCU. Here, because we solve it together and the prices are marginal for all the products, I have to pay all the product to be revenue adequate.
Sorry, I'm not a real math person, but as I'm understanding this, so RUC is incremental to the resource, right? So what you're saying here is that all resources will get this incremental capacity if they...
Physical resources.
All physical resources. So there's no way that this isn't going to be more expensive, right?
It all depends on the marginal prices. The marginal prices reflect the opportunity cost, the marginal cost for providing this service of meeting the demand forecast. Your financial energy schedule does that. So from a marginal settlement perspective, it needs to be paid for that, otherwise the settlement is not going to be adequate.
Okay, I guess I'm sort of looking at it this way. So this is a capacity product, and if you've paid for the capacity and asked them to bid into the market, from my perspective, as I said, the flexible capacity has a must offer obligation that goes into the real time. But now you're basically having a capacity overlay that's going to actually affect the clearing price, and that means everyone's going to get it. So I really am struggling with how this isn't a double payment for the capacity.
There's nothing to struggle about. This is just commodities that clear at the marginal price, and they need to be paid the marginal price.
It's a commodity that you're making up. So what other market has this reliability capacity product?
Sorry?
What other market has a reliability capacity product?
Many markets. We do have one now today with the rack availability. It's just we solve it as a different problem, and we pay it differently.
Okay, sorry. I won't argue anymore.
Operator, are there any questions on the phone?
We do have one more caller.
So as Chair, I'm going to suggest we finish at 10 after. We'll take this question.
Hi, it's Mark with Power X. Yes. Hi. Can we just go back to slide 17 quickly, because I think that Paul Gribbett from PG&E was really onto something, and I agree with what he described. I think that sequential is problematic in terms of getting the dispatch right. If we just go back to slide 17 here, and I'll try to be quick in the interest of time, I think there's something very important about that purple equation and this idea that in the integrated solution, you avoid making inefficient trade-offs between virtuals and physicals that you get today, and you get sequential. And the reason is that in the right side of that equation, in that constraint, you have physical energy plus reliability capacity up minus reliability capacity down. And that means that you will now avoid accepting virtual supply that might be a little bit less expensive than physical supply, recognizing that if you take virtual supply instead of physical supply, it can cost you more money in reliability capacity up, which in today's market is RUC. In this, it's your reliability capacity up. And so your physical energy is being determined not only by the top green equation, but also by the trade-off that if I take more physical energy, I need less reliability capacity up and more reliability capacity down. If I displace physical with virtual energy, I have to buy more reliability capacity up and less down. Now that's separate from intra-hour variability and uncertainty. This can happen at an hourly level and can, of course, be solved over the day, so it'll ensure that you properly commit and dispatch physical resources in recognition of how that impacts how much reliability capacity up and reliability capacity down that you take. Now, I think for the flexible ramping up and flexible ramping down, those are generally a function of actual variations in load and actual variations in the internal VAR fleet. It's a little bit more complicated than that, so I think we need more diving into the details to say, how do you set that requirement? Because on imports, when you take VARs as imports or you take physical supply that might go away, it increases your need for FRU and FRD, and somehow that needs to be incorporated, but I think that's more of a workshop discussion. But I think there is something very special about that purple equation that really improves the efficiency of dispatch and the trade-offs of reliability capacity up and down and physical versus virtual energy that will cause price separation and a more efficient dispatch.
That's a very keen observation, Mark, and we can easily see it with a simple example. If the lambda is $40 and Xi is $2, basically what this tells you is that you would prefer, as an optimal solution, to select a $40 physical resource than a $40 virtual resource, because the physical resource will actually help you meet that second target, so it's more valuable by another $2. So that is a more efficient solution from a pragmatic point of what is efficiency in terms of formulating an optimization problem. For a market solution, that's up to debate, but this is what we intended to do with this integrated IFM rack problem, to try to find an efficient solution where the commodities, and in this case energy and reliability, capacity up and down, are co-optimized to find the best possible outcome.
It also reduces the debate that we've seen for many years about allocating RUC costs to virtuals. That's no longer necessary because you've correctly selected them in the dispatch, the trade-off of physical energy versus virtual energy and the associated impacts to reliability, capacity up and down in the dispatch, and you've got the market clearing prices right for each product that's being provided. You no longer have this this debate over having to allocate uplift costs to virtuals. It'll actually make virtuals more efficient, but also appropriately separate prices and separate dispatch between physical and virtuals in the hours that it matters, that the grid needs more physical energy to save on reliability capacity up relative to down. So I think, again, there's something very special about that purple equation that really results in a more efficient dispatch price and lower overall cost than having inefficient selection between physical and virtuals, leading to excessive RUC costs that we see today.
We do have important items on the afternoon agenda, and I'm conscious that we're 15 minutes into lunch. May I ask you, George, I could see that if we went all the way to the last slide, that Megan and George, we could have a long discussion about these issues, and unfortunately there's not time for this. We might have to figure out another way to have this discussion. These are critical issues in a critical time. Is there something you would like to close with at this time, and we'll knock off by 12:15?
Yes, I would spend a minute or two on the regional deliverability constraints. We highlighted this as one of the 3 targets that we want to accomplish with the day-ahead market design, and I can go to these equations. We know what we want to do. We want to make sure that whatever we procure is deliverable, and the equations that are skipped, they really secure deliverability at the resource level, but then we want to go beyond that. We want to make sure that when we procure the products in a region, we want to make sure that they can be delivered outside of the region if we procure more to satisfy requirements outside, or in the region if we procure less, relying on bringing flexible ramp capacity from outside. So this is the objective of those regional deliverability constraints.
So quick question on this. The second term in the parentheses above the J term are the virtual. The notation has changed for the virtuals.
Yeah, I use
so the virtuals are in this constraint. Okay.
J's virtuals, yes.
Okay.
So what this basically says is we go on the regional interface. So we want to observe the N-1 simultaneous export capability, and we want to reserve on the regional interface room for energy exports, which is the first term. It's physical energy minus physical demand plus virtual energy supply minus virtual demand minus losses. So that reserves energy export. The second term is any ancillary services, upward ancillary services exports. We have minimum requirements for the ancillary services at the region, but we can procure more if ancillary services are cheaper in the region to meet system requirements. But this term makes sure that we will have transmission capacity on the regional interface to do that when we need to dispatch them. And similarly, the third term reserves transmission capacity in the export direction for flexible ramp up exports from the region or flexible ramp down imports into the region. We go with the higher of the two because at any point in real time we will not have to dispatch both. We either dispatch flexible ramp up or flexible ramp down. So we put all this together and we say we can have a procurement of the flexible RAM without any minimum requirements in the region. So we can have basically bring everything from outside as long as we reserve transmission capacity for that, to do that. Or we can get more than what we need for the region with the intent to export outside if we reserve export capability in the regional interface to do that. And we see it in the other way for the import capability as well. The terms are reversed. Regulation down exports need to reserve in the import direction. And this is flexible ramp down exports or flexible ramp up imports. So with this formulation, we'll be able to find the most optimal solution for procuring flexible ramp system-wide and making sure we reserve transmission capacity in the regional interface so that we can go in the region or out of the region depending on what the market solution clears.
Isn't, though, this the model we got now that isn't working? Because the problem is that we can export it from a region and import it to a region, but we aren't modeling it. Can it go through the region in between? And isn't this exactly what's not working in the EIM?
What's not working is that we don't reserve transmission capacity to be able to do that at the regional level. We reserve it out of each BAA, yes,
in each BAA, but we don't model it going through all the other places along the paths because that gets very complicated.
In the EIM, it's a different formulation at the BAA level. We want to go beyond to a lower granularity level here, the day ahead. We want to go to the ancillary service region level.
But still, are we going to model it not just out of the region and into the region, but through all the regions in between? We have an hierarchical formulation for the ancillary service regions where you have basically the system, and underneath it you have regions. So you're not interested in from one region to the other. If you have regional capacity reserved, you can always get in or out of that region. But not if there are regions in between. I mean, that's what we have in the EIM, where you can get it out of PowerX and you can get it into the CAISO, but you can't get it from the regions in between PowerX and the CAISO.
Scott is talking about a more general network where you could have a transshipment network. You've got just nested regions, which might work for the ISO, but once we go to west-wide, it wouldn't work for the region.
If we ever get constrained,
we'd have to
multiple regions within the CAISO, it won't work
either. It would. Let me go to the next one, which is for the FRP. For the IFM rack integrated formulation. In this equation, the energy, I'm using the reliability schedule and the demand forecast. If you flip this to the EIM, this becomes your net schedule interchange at the BAA level, so you can actually formulate that for BAAs in the EIM area. The only thing that makes it difficult for the real time, this is straightforward for day ahead and obviously for the expansion of the day ahead to other BAAs, but in real time we have one feature in the flexible RAM product that makes writing this equation a challenge, and that's the elastic demand. So in here where we say we have a flexible ramp requirement, and if I procure more, I need to export, there's another term in real time, which is how much of the flex ramp up requirement you relax. So these equations are a little bit more complicated to write for EIM. So we're targeting to do that in the day-ahead market expansion for the day-ahead, which is a simpler formulation. We don't have other BAAs. Gain some experience on how this constraint will work, and then we'll attempt to do it in real time.
I tend to agree with Paul Gribik, PG&E. I tend to agree with Scott. I don't think that this is modeling the transmission constraints adequately. Just because I can get out of one region, have enough export capacity out there and enough import capacity into another region, I can have a mess of looped BAAs, regions between them. How it's actually going to flow across the transmission network, I may be overloading some of the lines. That's not being modeled here with the nested regions. I would suggest, MISO had a very similar problem with their AS, and they actually model a requirement in one region, supplies nodally, and they say, okay, if I have to deploy my AS to meet that requirement, how is it going to flow on the actual transmission lines. It's not just saying, oh, I've got enough interface capacity. I actually look at how it flows. It's a much more difficult problem, but I'm just saying, I think there are examples out there that you can look at where people tried to address that.
Thanks, Paul. We're actually aware of that approach, and we were considering it, and we need to spend more time considering it because that involves writing constraints for multiple scenarios for the particular deployment of these services. So it gets a little bit complicated because you have
a little extreme.
Yeah.
And MISO hasn't solved it. They got problems with bottled, flexi ramp too between north and south.
They wrote the constraints that they never turned it on the flexi ramp, but they do have it turned on of what I would call a slightly brain damaged version for spin, non-spin, and those types of things. So there are better approaches. I mean, it requires a lot of work, but I'm just afraid that just looking at nested regions, we may be throwing the problem away and just saying, it's not a problem, whereas it well may be a problem.
Yeah, the fact that that's what's killing us now makes me worry that we can assume it's going to, what's already not working in practice may not work in theory.
So this formulation works with Megan's slide 8, which just has 2 regions in the CAISO. But as soon as you have regions that it could pass through, then Scott's point about not accounting for that, you might want to go to transshipment network, but then that doesn't account for the position where these things are within zones and how that affects individual lines, which would go to the 3rd level, which is what Paul's talking about.
The power flow, not just
transmission. Not even be able to model it. It might be something we have to study ad hoc offline and figure out what reasonable rules are on where we.
This is what Europe does with interzonal for energy. They do offline studies and then come up with very conservative interface limits to reflect that. But at any rate, for the moment, this could work if you have just 2 zones, north and south. But if PG&E resources have to pass through SCE to get to SDG&E, then this won't work, I think is Scott's point.
So this formulation is for regional interface constraints. So if something wills through, then it doesn't need any transmission capacity reservation on the regional interface. I think the constraints that you're worried is individual transmission line constraints that are not part of this, and this is the next step in the evolution of this kind of deliverability constraints. So this is only looking at the ability to get into a region or getting out of a region. So if you have nested regions, and you have capacity reserve on each regional interface, you can do that. Now, going from one region through another region to another, you may be violating transmission constraints, which are not showing here. What transmission constraints we enforce is only for the base case energy, for the energy solution, not energy plus capacity, which would have been what probably MISO has considered.
Okay, so I promised 10 after, then 15 after, and so George, do you want to have any closing remarks before we break for lunch?
The only thing that I want to point out is that in the integrated FM rack formulation, we propose to write all the capacity, ramp, and transmission constraints for both the energy, the financial day-ahead energy schedules, and the reliability energy schedules, so that you have both schedules being feasible, irrespective of who gets it right, the market or the ISO. So we have like sort of like an insurance policy there. It makes the problem more constrained, but these 2 sub-problems are quite loose, so we're not concerned about interactions. We can enforce all these constraints for both sub-problems. For the regional deliverability constraints, I think here in the IFM rack, it's sufficient to formulate it on the reliability energy schedule, so I don't think it's any useful to do it also for the energy schedule that will include the virtuals. So that was my comment. Thank you.
Any last comments from the audience or online before lunch? If not, I would suggest that we break until 1:15. Is that feasible? As long as you're not having a French-style lunch with a bottle of wine, that should be possible. Please say proceed.
I think they may need some wine after this.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, George. Thank you, Don.